Hello, my name is Martin, and today I'm going to compare Pride and Prejudice, the film from 2005 by Wright, and compare it to the novel, the original by Jane Austen. And as you might think by looking at the picture on screen, uh, you might think I'm going to compare the portrayal of these two big main characters, but no, I'm going to compare the portrayal of this fine man, Mr. Collins. More specifically, I'm going to discuss his introduction. And my research question is Mr. Collins is introduced differently in Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice and Wright's film adaptation. Why is this, and how do these changes affect the story? MacFarlane explains on the discourse of adaptation that being faithful is a major criterion for judging the film adaptation. Often we hear is it true to Tolkien, this new Hobbit thing, or is it a faithful representation of the book? Of course, this movie is a compressed version of Austen's book. It is 350 pages transformed to 2 hours of motion picture. This challenges the idea of it being faithful, as this amount of screen time hinders a one-to-one representation of the story. MacFarlane remarks that James Agee said that a good, faithful adaptation of Adam Bede should be the entire text read off screen by Herbert Marshall. This is not how they made this film. That would make it a one-to-one representation of the book, which would mean that there were no differences between Collins in the film and in the novel. But as this is a normal film, there are differences, and this is what I'm going to focus on in this project. His introduction. In both film and novel, Mr. Collins is first introduced in a letter sent to Mr. Bennet. In the novel, it is explained that the letter was received a month ago, while in the film, it is quite abrupt, as Mr. Bennet tells his wife that he hopes she ordered a good dinner today, as an addition to the family party might arrive, so it's quite abrupt and they don't have time to prepare for his arrival. While in the book, of course, he receives the letter a long time before Collins actually arrives. Now, this letter is important when comparing these two introductory scenes, as Mr. Collins' letter is shown in full in the novel. You can read the whole letter in the book, while in the film, Mr. Bennet merely holds it out and states that Collins will arrive soon. We do not know what is contained in the letter other than the expected arrival, maybe some information on when he arrives, and of course who sent the letter, but the only thing we may analyze is Mr. Bennet's displeased facial expression. Now, Hutchian writes about adapting letters specifically. For example, and you must pardon, I'm not good in French, Les Liaisons Dangereuses by Chaudelot de Laclos, which was written as a series of letters and has nonetheless undergone many adaptations in many different media in recent years. For instance, Christopher Hampton's 1996 play translated the novel's letters into spoken dialogue, and in the process changed the focus from the extended ironies of decadent aristocracy to the more intense intellectual battles of two mutually manipulative characters. So there are ways of adapting letters, and Collins's letter is adapted in this film not by reading aloud the letter, but by showing the character reading it how they interpret the letter, and we must analyze their impression by looking at facial expressions and such. Now, this is a prime example of showing versus telling, which often happens when you make a film adaptation of a novel. As in novels, things are often told to us. As this example, the letter is written in full in the novel, but they can't do that in the film, so they have to show us the contents. And to do that, they have to use facial expressions. They have to make characters talk to each other, discuss it, and that is what happens in this film. Hutchin explains that in the move from telling to showing, a performance adaptation must dramatize. Description, narration, and represented thoughts must be transcoded into speech, actions, sounds, and visual images. Mr. Bennett does this by looking kind of sad and displeased that they are having Collins as a guest. And it does this without us having to read the letter. Of course, reading the letter in the book provides a more detailed view of Collins before we actually meet him, as we can see his fondness of Lady Catherine and how he is as a person before we actually meet him. Elizabeth in the novel says that he must be an oddity, I think. I cannot make him out. There is something very pompous in his style. The reader also gets the impression that Collins is pompous. By reading the letter, we don't get this impression from Mr. Bennett's initial reaction in the film. But in the film, Elizabeth walks outside with her sisters, and she seems displeased and calls him the obnoxious cousin. Now, of course, Mr. Collins arrives both in film and in novel, and his appearance is very different. Now, this changes the story, and the viewer and reader's impression of him is different because of his appearance. Austen describes Collins as a tall, heavy-looking young man of 25. His air was grave and stately, and his manners were very formal. On page 65 in my 2018 version of the novel. Now in the film, as you can see by the picture, he is not tall, heavy-looking, or grave. He is a little man. He is scrawny, small. He looks shy and uncertain. This is very different from the way Austen describes him. And additionally, the actor portraying Collins, Tom Hollander, was around 38 years old when the movie was filmed. Although he looks fairly young, so he's not 25, but Wright probably thought the actor looked young, and he does also look young in the film. Now this transforms the viewer's perception of him. We don't see him as an intimidating, huge, heavy, pompous man, which Austen makes us do, but as an insecure, socially awkward, nerdy kind of figure. Now this makes us feel pity for him in the film, during the dinner especially. While in the book, we don't feel pity for him because he's not little and scrawny. This changes the story and changes how we view Mr. Collins. Stam notes that first, it is questionable whether strict fidelity is even possible. A counter view would insist that an adaptation is automatically different and original due to the change of medium. For example, you have to pick an actor to portray, in this case, Mr. Collins, and so you can't find a person in real life that's 100% faithful to how Austen imagines Collins. Now, Wright chose Tom Hollander to portray him. He did it with an idea in mind, because he is so different from the physical description and how he acts in the book. He's not obnoxious and broad and huge man, but he's a little scrawny, nerdy fellow. So he did this to change our perception of Collins, to feel sorry for him. Now this changes the story. Also, you feel pity for him instead of just disliking him, so he's more likable in the film, as he is kind of a comic relief in the film. Now in the novel, Collins admires the hall, the dining room, and all of its furniture. He was very praising and commendating of everything, but Mrs. Bennet was not as touched, because she thought that he did so because of his viewing of it all as his own future property. As Collins is to inherit the estate, he praises the furniture and everything. He kind of praises himself and his own estate in a way. Now later in both novel and film, Collins compliments the dinner and wishes to know which of his fair cousins the excellence of its cookery was owing, but Mrs. Bennet sets him right by assuring him that they were very well able to keep a good cook. He begs for pardon in the novel, and in the film he remarks that he's very pleased that the estate can afford such a living, which implies that he's happy that the estate is wealthy because he's going to inherit it. Now during dinner in the film, he delivers the line, "What a superbly featured room and what excellent boiled potatoes. It is many years since I had such an exemplary vegetable." Now this is pure humor and further strengthens the idea of him being a comic relief. Although most of the dinner is similar in film and novel, the film portrays him as awkward and not confident at all. He is looking down at his feet. The actor is surely portraying him as a frail character, but in the book he is absurd, but he has this confidence and ruthlessness. He says what he means without much hesitation, and he is very pompous. So the characters are different in that way. He's not comical in the same way as he is in the film. Now the conclusion. He's a comical relief in some way in the film as opposed to the book. He's suited for newer audiences. As humor is important in the 21st century, this might be why he was more comical in the film, to draw in new viewers. Also, he's not as dislikable on the introduction as in the book. He's not stuck up and totally unlikable. He's more weird instead. This changes the audience's view of him and changes the story down the line, as the intro creates this this image of Collins as a failure and someone you feel sorry for as opposed to someone you dislike. As his intro creates this image of Collins as a failure and someone you feel sorry for, his failed proposal later promotes less ignorance and you kind of feel pity for him. While in the book you find him unattractive and dislikable. Now here are my sources. Oh no, that's the wrong Collins. Thank you.